Hi, this is Nate Radley, and welcome to Coffee Talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department at Berkeley College of Music, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. As usual, we are joined by Cheryl Bailey, our assistant chair. Hey, good morning, Cheryl.
Morning. Sorry, matching Berkeley Guitar Department mug. The, sorry,
Oh,
Hey, Cheryl,
but
does that mean you
no,
drained it?
no. I drank it all, but now I have my water going. So
Okay. I think it's good. Cheryl Bailey is a master of balance, and I think it's good balance hydration with caffeination. Cheers, Cheryl.
absolutely.
We're joined by Ian Steed, as usual, our senior coordinator. Hey, good morning, Ian.
Hey all, how's it going?
Yeah, right from the office,
Hey.
directly from the guitar office. Hey, Ian, is that an old Berkeley mug?
It is. It's an old Berkeley mug and it's broken.
Have you
And
played
it's
it?
got a completely nonsensical passage of music on it.
I bet you that our guest today, Nate Radley, professor in the guitar department, could make a beautiful piece out of that motive, the composer that he is. Welcome, Nate Radley.
Oh, that's a kind way of introducing me. Thank you so much. I don't know. I don't
I
know
think
if
you
I could.
probably could. I've seen evidence. I've seen evidence.
Oh, well, you're very kind.
Um, Nate, this is your first year with us on the faculty.
It is. It's been a very exciting year for me. Thank you.
Cool. So most importantly, to start us off, are you a coffee drinker? And
I am a coffee drinker, yes. And I'm outside of New York right now, staying with some friends, one of whom is a big coffee person. And so we had to do like 4 espressos before we got one that was up to his standard of espresso. But now we're out of coffee. so I'm sitting here drinking water. I had my coffee earlier. I was like, let's get the coffee going for the coffee talk. But he's got a roast now. So he's completely out and he roasts. And this is my friend John Weekon. I should give him credit for his expertise. This is a drummer
John
that
Weekon's a roaster. Of course, John Weekon's a roaster.
or
I gotta
John
catch up
Weekon.
with him.
He's a
Does he have the
roaster.
machine, or does he do it old school?
He's got a machine and he just put a new thermostat. He's spent like 2.5 hours connecting wires, the red wire to the yellow wire, and now he's got the thermostat, which apparently is a big part of the machine. I'm learning. Yes.
so Cheryl's a roaster.
Oh, Cheryl's a roaster.
Yeah, but
Wow.
I'm not. I don't. I'm low tech. I'm old school with the skillet. But now I gotta talk to John. I haven't talked to John in a while, so this is a great reintroduction conversation.
Absolutely. No, I'm not sure. Actually, he's got the espresso machine. I don't know if he's got the I don't know how he does the roasting, but maybe I'll find out later today. John is from Seattle and was telling me how when he first moved out to New York, he brought an espresso machine and, he's been doing it for a while, I guess. So,
Great. Now, what's your common method though when you're home by yourself or when you're out on the road? Like, what do you look for?
well, at home we have like this like plunger press thing,
Hmm?
which is that like a known thing? It was new to me. My
I've
wife,
got that.
you've
The
got the
French
plunger
press.
press?
Oh yeah.
The
So
AeroPress
I guess it's the Europress. It's like a thin
or
little tube,
AeroPress?
little, yes. It's not like a
Those
French
are
press.
excellent. Those
Yeah.
make a really good cup.
They make a good cup, and then the cleanup is very concise and easy, and yeah. So that's my jam at home. You
I
know.
like that. That's really great. That's good. I like that you emphasize the cleanup.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm growing up, and as I grow up, I realize that my actions have consequences, and that if I make a mess, I also am responsible for the cleanup. It's taken me a long time to come to this realization, but
Well,
yeah.
it maybe isn't a coincidence that you've increased your teaching responsibilities in your life and you're coming to responsibility.
Cycle of life. You increase your teaching and you learn about picking up after yourself. Wow. I told you it's been a big year for me. So,
That's right. That's right. So we're going to talk a lot about your all the different music that you play and your approach as a composer and improviser
Thank you.
and a writer and arranger and in many different styles. And we were lucky enough to be able to have you join us at Berkeley on the faculty this year. And one thing that really helps people who are listening to this, a lot of people are listening as they come to Berkeley as
Mhm.
students or in different capacities. And it really helps people to hear about first days. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't have to be your absolute first day that you came with us on the faculty, but what was your impression in your first days? Like, what were some things that stood out to you about being at Berkeley?
Well, I I don't want to like be too flattering here or anything, but the first thing I noticed was like, wow, things are pretty organized. Like I was like, I had a very nice room studio to go teach in, and my schedule was all set and well organized. And this may seem like a trivial thing to some listeners, but this is no trivial thing. It's great when you show up and everything's kind of dialed in. So you can focus on your job teaching. And so right away I was like, wow, this is really cool. I've got some good amps, and there's the PA. I can plug in my devices to that, and we can do some listening, and so I could focus on meeting the new personalities that were going to be part of my studio at the time. It's really exciting to meet. um I don't exactly remember how many new students I had at the time, but it's right away it's a lot of new people to kind of get to know and bring into your orbit. And so a lot of my new students were freshmen just coming to Berkeley, and it was an exciting time. Just kind of both, we're all getting situated together, and we're all very excited to be at Berkeley. And so it was a really great couple of days for me.
You know, you brought up a really good point when you're saying these things that some people would think are trivial. You've taught at a lot of different places and some really
Mhm.
prestigious schools, and you've
Mhm.
played a ton of gigs and been on the road. And one thing that we talk about a lot is like people are like, well, what are important things in terms of like professionalism? And I
Mhm.
think one of the things that we've learned over the years in the guitar department is like from being in chaotic situations that weren't organized, like
Yes.
honestly, if you're talking to people who have this aspiration of being a band leader or um, running sessions or running a school in any way, the more you can get in place
Mhm.
for the artists, for the musicians, for the faculty to come in and just focus on the task at hand and the music at hand and spend that
Absolutely.
energy that way, that's really
Absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. There's like a saying that I'm sure we're all familiar with, that getting to the gig is the gig. Like it's harder than the actual gig. You just got to get your stuff to the gig, and that's often true in some situations. But starting off at Berkeley, getting situated was not the gig. That was someone else's gig, fortunately. And so I could focus on the teaching side, and being in situations where people are aware of the work experience. That obviously goes for performance situations, and we've all worked as side people accompanying others, and when band leaders are thinking about what the experience of their band is going to be like, it creates such a better musical experience, and a sense of, right away you feel like a feeling of empathy, or a feeling of concern for the community, which is really really important. A band is a little community, a school is a community with lots of little communities within it. And when you see that people are really trying to take care to establish a community with certain types of norms of professionalism or caring or so on and so forth, it means a ton. It really does.
Yeah, we're getting ready to have people come in this week for some things, and one of the things we're thinking about is like, what wasn't always present when we were traveling, like
Right.
food. How
Yes.
do I get from the hotel to the school? Do I have to carry everything? Is it close?
Absolutely.
Am I going to eat? Do I have, are there beverages available? Do I have a place to rest?
Yes.
I mean, there are so many
Mhm.
times when you travel and then they're like, oh yeah, just hang out. Well, where? Like in the hallway? You know what I mean? Is there like a
Totally.
place to
Totally.
sit? Where am I gonna be? And you can feel the energy of the whole thing when you send out an itinerary that has food on it
Right.
and rest periods and things like, do you need to make photocopies? Do you need cables?
Yeah.
Do you need any kind of electronics? Like, do you need people to carry stuff for you? Um, it makes a huge difference. And I think like if people are making lists of what to think about, these are things that sometimes we only think about because they weren't there.
Yep.
They
Yep.
show up somewhere and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no food. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's exhausting when you have to devote so much energy to just taking care of yourself in that situation when what you really want to be doing is sending your energy outwards towards the community of people you're working with. And so when people take care of that so you don't have to, be so concerned with where my calories coming from. Am I hydrated? Am I caffeinated? Did I everything. Do I have a guitar cable? Did I remember a guitar cable?
Mhm.
All these things, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
it helps. So, but beyond the logistics of starting off my first year at Berkeley, it was really exciting to get to, meet the community, to understand where my students were coming from and experience really that diversity of musical experiences that they were coming to Berkeley with already, which was really remarkable to me. Some of my students, when you start off, sometimes the first thing that hits you is like, wow, there are a variety of different levels.
Right.
But as I dug a little deeper, I realized that people were specialists in ways that I couldn't quite see right off the bat. Like maybe someone would come in and would be like a little bit less experienced on the guitar, but then I would realize they would play me a song of theirs, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, this is incredible! Like great songwriting. Less guitar focus, more songwriting focus. Great, loved it." Some of my other students were more into, kind of production, logic, that kind of stuff. And again, extremely good at that. And so it was really cool to get to know people and start to identify what their strengths were. And I was just really impressed, you know. And it's been really fun to see, some people, maybe we'll talk about this more in the course of this talk, but, some of my teaching is jazz focused. And so some of my students are, kind of really going for playing jazz. And some students come to me with much different backgrounds.
Mhm.
And it was just really cool. Like one of my students is a really great hip hop producer, and it took me a second to, well, it actually didn't take me a second. I listened to his tracks in the first in the first lesson, and was just like, wow, this is incredible, and a resource that we can bring into the lessons too. Um,
Mm.
so that's been really cool.
So I was thinking about your playing, and I think one of the things that makes you such a great teacher for the Berkeley students, as you described, is you have a stylistic diversity in your playing, but it
Thank
seems to
you.
come from like a core of your musicianship. So I was listening to some of your recordings this morning, and there are some that are so like obviously roots music and country influenced and
Right,
really groovy, and then
right.
there are some that are jazz, and then you have new music, and you're I was looking at your duos,
Oh,
and
thanks.
yeah, they're great, and you have a new music component to what you do. You have like a traditional like contemporary jazz part of what you do. You have a country influence thing that you do, and you're a great solo guitar player. And
Thank you.
so I'm wondering like if you could talk about what you see for yourself as, do you see a common thread in all those things, or do you feel like they're separate to you? How do you think about
I
that?
mean, I think of, you know, actually, all music kind of being the same. So, I think of music as being a way of, basically exchanging energy through sound. This might be a little philosophical but let's like when you do performance, like you are presenting, you're putting sound forward into a space, And in doing so, you are trying to change the energy of that space and trying to change the energy within the people within that space. And that of course occurs whether you're listening to a live performance or whether you're listening to a recording. And I think in terms of how that energy is being transmitted, all music uses the process of tension and release, building up tension and releasing tension. And I'm really just interested in how that those kinds of narratives can be presented in a lot of different styles. I think probably the one thread that kind of runs through things is, I mean, some of my things might be kind of new music oriented, but I think of them as songs for some reason. I think of everything as when I don't really think of myself as a composer per se, as more as a songwriter. I really like just how a song can accomplish something in a very concise amount of time. I really think songs are a cool vehicle for what we do as improvisers. When I say song, I guess it could be kind of abstract what I'm talking about, because it doesn't have to be like literally like a Paul Simon song. It could be just a very simple monophonic theme or something. But it's a short, or it doesn't have to be that short, but it's a fairly concise statement of what the subject of the performance is going to be. Whereas I think sometimes compositions can have such wide scopes to them, and people that I think of as, quote unquote, real composers, this is just my own little world of language, so please ignore me. I think have like a real control over and mastery of a wide variety of forms. And that's I guess, form is something that kind of interests me, but maybe like on a micro level, not grand, large 40-minute forms, but like, I'm more like 5 minutes. That's my
Yeah.
world.
Well, I feel like, when I said that thing about the little notes that were on the mug that Ian
Right,
held, I
right,
feel like I feel like if you had that mug,
right,
you could come up with songs that reflected, like instrumental songs that reflected new music. You could
right.
take that same motive and you could put it into like more of a country context. You could put it more into a pop context if you wanted to. Because
Yeah.
I think, and I'm hoping that you'll talk a little bit about your process in doing those kinds of things,
Okay.
because
Sure. Sure.
I feel like one thing that is really interesting to me as a classical guitarist who
Hmm.
like is now learning about improvisation more is that when you see that, you don't
Hmm.
just see this melody, you see like how it's built, and they're like, oh, look at the intervals in there and like what that
Absolutely.
might imply harmonically, and then
Absolutely.
what that might mean phrasing wise, and that might mean you're seeing a world in there that I
Yep.
would normally do in the reverse way. I would see the entire piece and then I would be like, oh, you know what, it comes
Right.
back to that little line.
Right. Right.
and and so can you talk about that, like say you had a melody like that in your task as a
Right.
writer.
Well, just to like backtrack just for a second, because I really think of writing music as writing words, and I really am inspired by like fiction writers or even nonfiction writers, and just that, like, I really like writers that have like a lot of when I'm talking about writing right now, I'm talking about fiction or nonfiction. I really like writers that are incredibly concise and have like a way of there's like thematic construction, the way people write paragraphs and write stories. And so when I look at the music on Ian's mug, Ian, mug, demonstrate mug. Oh my God, that changes everything. No, no, I'm just kidding.
Forget it.
Forget what I just said. No, I mean, it's I look at that as like a potential theme of with variations that can be explored. And so in terms of how that like fits into like the matrix of style or something like that, I guess that really comes from like an emotional place for me. And when I do write, I really try to figure out a way to develop an emotional connection to the material that I'm working with. And then it might kind of find its way into one style or another, but I also try to like blur them a little bit, I always like intervals. I love the sound of intervals. I'm basically like ear training class was like a symphony to me. I loved it. I just love the sound of intervals. And so if I can expose the intervallic content of that line in some way, what's consonant and what's dissonant about that. And that can be explored. Again, it comes back to tension and resolution, and that can be explored in kind of like a new music-y way, or in a very rootsy way, or in a jazz way. It can be explored. I'm starting to learn a little bit more about electronic music right now, and there are a lot of different. So in some ways, I guess sometimes I could just kind of sit down and I'm like, all right, today let's write this kind of piece. What's the subject? And then it could be a melody like Ian's. But it just takes like a short little kernel of an idea, and I try to stay true to that for as long as I can.
Do you find yourself thinking as a soloist, or, because you play solo guitar and you play in groups?
Yep.
So, do you find yourself going back and forth, or is there a specific way that you approach something when you know you're going to play it on the solo guitar that's a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, I think I have a weakness with this, is that I write everything pretty much as a solo guitar piece, and that was actually one of the reasons that I got into you mentioned this duet project that I've done, which is a series of, I don't know, it was like 8 duets or something, and I actually started writing them just as counterpoint studies for myself. Half of these duets are just monophonic counterpoint between 2 guitars, and I'd reached a point where, my kind of solo guitar sort of chord melody way of writing, I was just thinking like, wow, this has got to stop. This can't continue for the rest of my life. And so I tried to, so I explored linear counterpoint as a way to kind of get outside of that, recognizing my own inexperience really with it. And then half the duets in that project are kind of like, I kind of tried to make like a sort of weird 12-string guitar or something with 2 people playing really dense chords at the same time and trying to create different kinds of density with that texture in mind. So they're really like, I'm kind of in those duets, I'm going between 2 different textures, and trying to get away from being like a solo guitar writer, because a lot of my kind of more jazzy pieces are like orchestrations of solo guitar pieces in some ways. And that tends to lead me towards a certain type of melody, certain type of harmonic motion, and a certain kind of harmonic clarity, which I don't always think is good. you know 2 lines can be so ambiguous and
Right.
so evocative.
Yes.
And so for some reason, if you're kind of writing in a chord melody way, like you can be in such like guitar harmony brain, which is my
Right.
comfort zone, to be honest. you know
Yeah, and that's, I mean, really, because when you have 2 notes, it could be a whole lot of implications, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really love that kind of ambiguity, that kind of sound. But I don't think that's actually my getting to that place is something I have to kind of like be like, come on, don't play a full chord.
So
Stop,
I like that. I
yeah,
like that you're pushing yourself, because that's another thing I think that comes up a lot, is this idea that, like, how do you push yourself to do the things that scare you, especially after you hit different levels of expertise,
right. Yep.
right?
It is very hard. And I guess sometimes you have to listen to your boredom a little bit, and just like guitar for me is like a daily thing it's like that I have to get in touch with on a daily basis, really, to feel like myself. And it's been this way for all my life, or since I started playing guitar. I was 12, I think, at the time. And I just but for something that you have to like evolve and change and bring new things into the fold. For me, I had to do that. I should say that, just in order to kind of keep that relationship with music and with guitar evolving over time. Sometimes I'm making it sound like it's like my choice all the time, like I'm just sitting back and going like, today I'm going to, but a lot of the time it's, it's necessity can be the the motor too, like there was a time in my life where I was very fortunate to play a lot of jam sessions with friends,
Hmm.
and everyone, we would always like write music for those jam sessions that we were playing, and I just wanted to participate in the community in that way, and that was really like one of the main engines for me to even start writing in the first place.
Mm.
um and so I'll think about the kinds of, just who are the life changes, different people come into your musical orbit over time, and so I try to incorporate those influences into my music too, because that's my life. I'm trying to work with what's going on.
The last question I have about your process that I jotted down is I wonder if you could talk about the relationship between written music and improvised music for you and the stuff that you write, because you have these duos and they're really written out, and then I'm guessing you must also write with charts, and you must also write things where maybe you envision it one way. I mean, but maybe you'd come back to it after going through a bunch
Yeah.
of changes and then play it totally differently. Like, do you feel like for yourself you need to capture it? Like, if someone else plays your stuff, do you have an expectation of what they might bring to it? Like, how do you think about that
Yeah,
relationship?
that's another huge issue and great question. And I try to be really open. Uh, I think over as I've gotten older, I've tried to get less and less specific with the people that I'm working with. I think when I was younger, I would write songs and I would have a lot of ideas about how things are supposed to go down, and I've that was really to my detriment. In the jazz world, and really actually in every world I've operated in, the best results come from letting people be free to formulate their own relationship to my music, to the stuff that I'm writing. And so I trying to get better and better at writing things that allow people more freedom in the way they interpret my music. And I'm trying to write music that is more suggestive of how to interpret it too. It's not a one-way street, so I want the music to be evocative of a certain type of interpretation, but I also want the interpretation to be free and spontaneous, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like almost like a contradiction. Well, no, that's not a contradiction in terms. That seems like that should work together.
Yeah, well,
Um,
it's really interesting because how do you prepare, especially if you're looking at something written? How do you convey it? Is it words? Is it like
I
gestures? Is it like
Yeah,
kind of almost like a drawing? Like, how do you
yeah.
that's fascinating to me. Like, how do you convey what you want?
Well, it's a lot of my pieces start off with like a guitar figure. So a lot of times when I'm rehearsing, I'm talking about the music here that's more band oriented, I will I'll just, I just do this all the time. And again, everything I do all the time is something I should really think about. Is this something I should be doing all the time? But I just start off with some kind of figure that I feel like sets the vibe and the tone for the piece, and then the conversation can evolve. And then as the piece evolves, if the writing is good, I feel like the tension and resolution can be fairly clear to the band members. And I do a lot of editing of the stuff that I've written, so I definitely, after those early encounters in performance, it's very rare that I do write something, bring it to some musicians, and I'm like, great, another one done. It's like I'm always just like okay, I've got to tweak this. Solo forms, in the jazz world, solo forms are really, that's a really tricky thing, because in the course of my time writing, I think I've overwritten most of my solo forms, and made them like more complex than they need to be. And so again, I'm trying to distill and simplify and make clear. But to get back to your question, and this is something actually I was talking about in a lesson this week. One of my students has been doing a lot of writing and bringing in some of his compositions. They're very strong, but he sort of plays me the theme, and then he says, well, then I'm going to tell them to do this. And I'm always just like, oh no, don't tell them to do anything, please. Let them, like, you're playing with your colleagues and friends, and probably the best place to start is what they think of, where they're coming from. Words and music, I have a really hard relationship with. Like, if I have to like read someone's liner notes in order to appreciate the piece of music, I kind of find that a little repellent or something, if things are like too conceptual in that way. Donnie's coming in here. This is our friend's dog. Come here, Donnie. There you are.
Oh,
Okay.
hi, buddy.
Yeah, there he is.
Oh, this is great.
I used to dog sit Donnie, and so we have a little vibe. So
Oh, see?
here he is.
See,
Yeah.
he's very
Yeah.
encouraged by your welcoming way that you describe your music.
He's like my therapy animal. Yes.
Oh,
So
maybe
yeah,
Donnie wants to come live in the guitar department.
Donnie would be a great asset to the guitar department. So Donnie, what I was talking about was, telling people, just trying to, yeah, I don't like music that needs a lot of explanation. I really like things to be immediate and emotional and direct, and it could be incredibly abstract, but I still want it to like really hit people in a strong way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So, though I like to sit around and talk about music with people a lot, when it comes time to make music, I don't like to talk as much. Yeah. Me personally.
Cheryl, you're sitting there, I think, off and on with Joni the cat, and I know that you have a lot to relate to with everything Nate is saying as a composer and an improviser and a player. So, what's on your mind?
One thing about Joni the cat is during this whole time, she's been doing her zoomies around the couch. And so if I was looking away and laughing,
Right.
it was because there was like this maniac orange cat just all around. Now she's sleeping.
Now she's chilling.
She's chilling
Right
now.
on.
But
Right.
there were a couple of things. I like what you said about I don't know if I got it right, but well, mainly because I do in a lot of my classes, we do a lot of writing. We have to write lines and stuff like that. And I always tell them, write so many lines that you get bored with them, because that's when it's going to get exciting.
Yep.
When you hit that place and you keep realizing, oh, I always start here and I go in that direction, or I always start there, or I always use this rhythmic phrase. You have to write a lot till you start to see that repetition of that.
Yes.
And then that's when it's going to get exciting, because then you're going to start to go, oh,
right.
if I start here and go there and go there, and then you keep doing that process till after a while, then you've explored
Absolutely. Absolutely.
permutations of things. So that was one thing I'd love you could talk about that. And the other thing that struck me was, I feel very similar to you about music. So, people will say, oh, what kind of music do you play? And my answer, and I know they think I'm being a smart ass, is good music, right?
Okay.
Because I don't see the genres. And I know we here are always about, we represent all these genres.
Totally.
But the thing is, once you start studying music deeply, that those genres are, often I compare them to, people in South Africa speak English, and people in England speak English, and people in America, but they're different, but they're the same.
Totally. Different dialects. Different
dialects, right? And so I had a student the other day who came in and was playing some of his compositions, and he was really just upset, like, well, I don't know if this is jazz. And I was like, why are you boxing this in?
Totally.
And I was like, well, you love this music that whatever this umbrella of music we call jazz, but we know that it is all these other things. So why you're building so much anxiety and pressure on yourself about what is this music? Well, it's not this, but it's improvised music and it's composed music. And so I guess talking about those two things about writing and finding your tendencies and how you grow, and then maybe just about this thing, like helping directing students in this way to just say, you know what, there's a bigger picture behind this. Like, I'm a funk player, I'm a rock player, or you're a music player, right?
Totally. And I find that students, when you ask them about what they listen to, just in the internet age now, it's generally quite diverse. There's a lot of music that people are exposed to, and so I just have to ask a little bit, or just say, have you heard this? And then I'm like, oh, like, people's listening is usually they've got a lot of different things going on, and which I think is really, really exciting. So I just, kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, Cheryl, with people that are trying to put their stuff in a certain kind of category and make it maybe safe in that way. I think a lot of times the most interesting stuff to me comes from people being like really honest with themselves about what they really like to listen to, where they're coming from musically. And if I really feel pretty strongly, and I could be totally wrong, but if you're really honest with yourself, there's a lot going on in everybody. And in fact, non-musicians too. Everybody listens to a lot of different kind of stuff. And they might be dipping into certain kind of categories and so on and so forth. But like, just for example, like over the summer, like I watched this movie about like Colombian cumbia music. I know nothing about that. Okay. But then I just went into this like phase, and it's like, so, I don't know what that's going to do to my listening, my experience, but like everybody has these experiences where they get exposed to something that's outside their normal realm, but it becomes like a little, part of their musical universe. The other thing I was going to say, Justin, and I'm sure, Cheryl, you were probably thinking of this Duke Ellington quote when you said, like, I like good music. The Duke Ellington famous quote is like, what kind of music do you play? Do you play jazz? And Duke Ellington said, there are two kinds of music. There's good music and there's bad music. And, in the world of like subjectivity that we live in, like, of course that leaves a lot of space for subjectivity. I don't think anyone's saying there's an absolute good music and there's an absolute bad music, but just, don't think of categories, is I think where he was coming from. You've got your own good music. You've got the things that maybe are not as interesting to you. But just to think of, your relationship to it rather than the genre itself.
This that you're both talking about, maybe both of you have an idea about this. It reminded me of something that we hear sometimes, like from non-musicians who are asking about what we're doing in the guitar department at Berkeley, or from students like, well, music itself is so compartmentalized. Like some of the gigs that people will get, studio gigs or recording gigs, they're going to want them to play this kind of simple part, right?
Right.
And so, but I really feel that when you do what both of you are talking about, and you have this artistic and curious and expansive approach to learning everything you can, that what you bring when you bring yourself to a part that's focused is different than if someone only knew how to play those chords or that line or whatever. Do you feel that way? I mean, like, how does being a musician that has all of the experience and interest that you both have, how does that come across when you're playing a part that is focused and is in one style and maybe is simpler than a lot of the things you're writing when you're writing art music?
For me, it's really improved my ability to listen to different situations. When I go back and think about, when I didn't have as broad a perspective, and of course I'm trying to keep broadening my perspective. I'm not, but I'm not sure I would be able to like really listen to the material in the same way. It would be so, I would oftentimes kind of was like always shaping things towards a certain type of comfort zone that I had. And then as my influences broadened and my listening broadened, and I was able to bring that into the way I played guitar too. It wasn't just, just that I like to listen to a lot of different things, but I learned how to try to express all those different things in my guitar playing, that when it would become time for like a simpler sort of thing, I could just listen to it, I think, a little bit more objectively. I could one of my teachers made a really interesting comment to me once, and I was playing with him, and he said, so the first thing he said was, "Sounds good," and I knew something was going to come after that. And he said, "But I want you to imagine that your ears are over there across the room, and you're listening to yourself while you're playing." And I think that might be kind of what I'm trying to get at right now, like the ability to kind of like hear myself and not totally be inside myself is something that I think having a lot of broad influences has helped me be able to do. I could kind of hear maybe where that kind of piece was coming from in a different way. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
a kind of abstract point right there, but that's how I feel about it. Cheryl, do you want to clear up my mess here?
Yeah, I want to say one thing, and then I want to hand it off to you. I think that it's not abstract because it translates practically.
Right.
Like, because when I hear you play, like I could hear you play 5 notes, and the color and the timbre and the shape of the note and just the maturity you bring to it. It says to me that it's like when someone who is a really great speaker
Right.
says a
Thank
simple
you.
thing and you remember it for the rest of your life and you believe them.
Well, thank
It's
you.
not someone who only knows how to say a few words.
Thank you.
You can tell, right?
Right.
You're welcome, but it's also true, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
you're saying these
Well,
maybe 5 notes like someone who's
right.
the best
Well,
public speaker in the world would say 5 words, and it's different than if you only knew five
right.
words.
Well, the thing that I try to tell my students is that, everything you do from the moment you plug in, well, everything you do before you even plug in your guitar should be intentional. But once you plug in your guitar in particular, it should be very intentional. Like, the way you set up, if you're playing an electric guitar, the way you set up your amp, don't just plug into the amp, make some decisions about why your setup on that amp is that way. When you know, pick up your guitar and you choose to use one pickup or another, why are you doing that? So that there's intention behind everything that you're doing, that you've had some kind of thought. I usually say to my students, like, there's not really like right or wrong here. It's just what's intentional and what's not intentional, and I want you to have as much control over what you're doing. Like if I say, why are you, if I say like, I didn't like that, let's say, which I try not to say stuff like that very often, but I want them not to say, well, I liked it, so there, I want to go like, I want to get like, well, why did you do that? If you've got a reason for why you did it, I don't know if I can really, then I think I have to back off a little bit. You've already thought about it, then we can have like an artistic conversation as two artists, like, I thought you should have gone for blue. Well, I went for red. I like blue. Okay, cool. But I just want some intention behind every little thing. And sound obviously is the most immediate way of sensing a musician's intention. When the you just hear the timbre of their voice on their instrument, it hits you right away. And so I really emphasize that with my students, like, make your sound very intentional. Yeah.
Cheryl, what is it for you? What does having this broad experience give you when you play something focused?
Well, I mean, it seemed like in the context, I love that. I'm stealing that. Pretend your ears are on the other side of the room, because that gives you that, you're taking your ego out of it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think also too, if you went into a session and someone has a line written and they want it in a certain way, your goal is to play the music as they are instructing you to. So that means your ego isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to when it is your own gig and you write your own music. So I think that's what's important about having a lot of those experiences. Also, obviously listening to a lot of stuff, because if someone says to me, play this, like, this is supposed to be like Wes Montgomery, that means a lot more to me than just play octaves, because I've dug so deeply into that man's playing the feel of it and the note choices even more. Like you don't have to play octaves to play like Wes, because that if you've done that depth into that player, you know those subtleties of that. So I'm going to do that, and it's not going to be like what I would play, because that's what I'm being instructed to do. So I'm not going to put my ego in there. But on the other side, that's why I also really encourage students and folks to write their own music, because then you get that sense of what you want to do.
Right. Oh.
So, I think it's a balance of those being on all those sides of the room, give you that depth to what you're going to do. But I mean, to me, it's really thinking about a thing about taking away your ego. Like, well, that, this isn't what I would do. Well, it doesn't matter what you would do in this situation, so being able to do that. But I think that's also another thing too, what you're talking about with your tone and your intention, like being able to step away from that and look as if, I remember hearing something that Jocko would say, he would have these moments, where it was almost, he was floating above himself, listening to how the whole thing was going. So it's not about you at that point. You're looking at and listening at the bigger picture of
things. And that what you're saying right there is like definitely what, when I started composing, did for me. All of a sudden, I would listen to pieces of music in a very different way, and I would try to focus on the intention of the composer and why things were happening a certain way, and it just completely changed my hearing. And it changed the way I would approach playing other people's music, because I would have a whole new respect for their intentions. And then also I feel like, with composing, it's like it's a process of kind of self-determination and finding really who you are. So I think composing is a great way to, as a student, just to, to figure out how you filter all these different influences. Well, if you want to figure out who you are and what to make of all that, I think my best recommendation would be to write a piece of music, and figure out that's where you're going to have to make those decisions. And so that's going to change over time, of course, but it's the best for that.
It's interesting too, because even with your own music, I wonder if you both feel this way, that once you write it, it's not you. It's not like you're writing you. It's like it's its own thing. And so you could approach that the way you approach someone else's music, in the sense that you're just asking the music what it needs and you're serving it, as opposed to like wrapping yourself and your self-worth up in everything that you write.
Right.
Once it comes through you, it's its own life.
Totally. And it's sometimes it's easier to be a side person than a band leader in that regard, because you like look at the material in a different way. When you are playing your own music, you have like all your original intentions that you have to negotiate. Whereas when you're playing someone else's music, it's a much more open canvas. That at least that I feel. I really have a hard time with my own music trying to get past, all right, this is what I wanted, and try to get into, what do I want? Well, what does it want? And that it requires me really being in the moment in a way that is challenging and makes the whole lifetime of playing music really fun, because I'm trying to figure out how I can do a better job of that over time. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question, was like, have you found the secret to get out of, how do we get out of our own way? How do we do that, Nate? How do we do that, Cheryl? Cheryl, how do we do that? How do we get out of our own way when we write our own music? Tell us the secret.
Cheryl?
She's not even hitting the mute button. She's
No, one thing that I think is interesting is when I get to play, I mean, I have regular bands that I play with, and it's cool. But I like when I play my music with other bands and see how things that they do, it makes me think about it differently. And then when I go back and play with my regular band, those things come out. So,
totally.
I think that is to play your own music in as many situations as possible and see how the other people add their, sensibilities to it.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it's probably something that evolves, that ability evolves over time, and it's a function of being open to the experiences that are already a part of your life, you know, and trying to put, within those situations, learn from them as much as possible. And that sometimes does putting your ego and intentions to the aside a little bit and seeing what other intentions are going into that situation. So it's really hard. I don't want to sound like you know, um, there's like this might be a little bit of a segue here, but this week coming up, there are a bunch of concerts celebrating. Well, there's a concert on Thursday celebrating the legacy of Mick Goodrick, and these sorts of themes were something that I really got out of reading his book, The Advancing Guitarist, because it was, that's such an interesting book, and I've never read anything like it, because it's to some extent this is how you learn the fingerboard. Donnie's reacting to this. Really?
He believes in that book as well.
Yeah. He believes in that book as well. I think there you go, Donnie. Your owner is calling you. Okay. So, Mick's book is like half music book and half like Buddhist treatise on teaching yourself like the mind of a improvising musician. And, there are these like sections in the back of that book where he's like, are you having a hard time, figuring out how to play? Well, maybe you should go restring your guitar. Maybe you should go feed some ducks. Maybe you should not play for a week. And I was like reading that as a teenager, it was like really kind of blew my mind and introduced to me the idea that there's more to this game than the nuts and bolts. There's more to it than just the theory. And I just was so blown away. And as I get older, by the just incredible honesty of that presentation, that he chose to write a book about music, but then was really honest about some of the things that go into that it's more than just learning your modes, and which is so important, by the way. But there's a lot to learn mentally from the whole thing, and we're so blessed to have this practice that keeps us in touch with this lifelong learning process. And anyways, I've never known a book to really address those different sides in such a way, and in a way that really gets you thinking. He doesn't present any answers for you. You have to figure them out. That's crazy to me that can be accomplished in the book.
I agree, and it's funny you say that because I've been reading the book again,
Right.
like really reading through it,
Right.
in sort of preparation for what we're talking about. And in the beginning, it says like this is not a method book.
Right.
You supply the method. That's what I think inspired me when I picked it up when I was young.
Right.
This idea that you supply your method at any given time.
Yeah.
And then now, as the chair of the guitar department at Berkeley, knowing that years after he wrote this book, he comes back to Berkeley. Mick comes back in 1990, and he and Larry Bayonne and Rick Peckham reimagine all of our proficiency material. You can see that it came out of that book. Like,
absolutely,
the triad voice leading cycles are in that book, and all the way that we play the modes, and all the way that it's just like it's almost like, some of the questions where he says like, if a person was interested, they could take this and they could do it in these 5 different ways. And then you think, oh my goodness, that's level 3. That's what you're doing in level 3. That was what a person would do when he asked those open-ended questions. Like,
right.
And the whole idea that blows me away is, yes, it's more, of course, that this idea of approaching our instrument this way allows for maximum interpretation, maximum creativity.
Totally.
Because you become yourself. You have to do it. But the thing that I think is missing from that type of philosophy that this reinforces is you have to know the fretboard as
Yes,
deeply as possible. And you
absolutely,
have to understand how your hands work to make the sounds physically. Like, it
absolutely.
doesn't shy away, and neither does the proficiency, from the fact that it's going to take you years and
Yes,
thousands of hours. And
yes,
I think what blew me away when I came to Berkeley, I went through my doctorate,
right.
and I studied it off and on, in in college and grad school for classical guitar for 15 years, and there was this approach that you all had taken to mastering the fretboard that made me feel like a beginner. When I
Right,
went back and I was
right,
like, wow, I just had never,
right.
I came at it from a different way. And
Interesting.
that I think is, once you get over the shock that that's true for every guitarist, it's
Yes,
really cool.
it is really cool. Yes. And another thing about that book for me was that I mentioned earlier I read it first when I was a teenager, and part of why I read it was just I was desperate for information, and there were not. I'm old enough that there was not a YouTube for me to get guitar lessons from. There were not a lot of jazz books, at least that I could find at that time, and so I got this book about jazz, and I was like, all right, let me learn some like hot licks or something. And there are no hot licks in this book. Okay. It's all about, learning the fingerboard. And so it like, I mean, that was like a little bit of an adjustment for me too. I was like, like, oh, so there's like a terrain here that I need to know in order to feel freedom. And that is, I think one of the things that the proficiency is trying to accomplish, and it's just one of the things that as guitar players we have to accomplish. I make the analogy with my students all the time, like there's a little keyboard in the studio I'm in, and like you look at the keyboard and you're like, all right, I see the notes, there they are, and you can chop up that keyboard in any kind of variety of ways that you want to, but you look at the guitar fingerboard and you're like, damn, what is this thing? Where is everything? And it takes a lot of time. I mean, I'm not done. It's every time I practice, that's in part what I'm working on, just trying to learn better where things are,
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's great that he likens it to an ice skating rink, because
Yes.
I just keep thinking, like, how many times I fall down. Like,
Right, right.
I'm like, you're just gonna fall down. I've been skating since I was tiny, and I
Yeah,
I am definitely going to fall down every time I put skates on. And I think that's good to know. I think it's important for everybody to know, like, this isn't the stuff that's on the test that you just kind of, oh, I don't really need it because I'm going to be creative. This is what helps you become creative and
totally.
more confident. And the more you know it from a different angle,
Right,
and
totally.
the more different avenues it opens.
And it's really kind of a genre independent presentation in a lot of ways. It's like another analogy that I use often is it's like you're a painter, and he's trying to teach you the colors, not just green, not just the primary, not green's not a primary color, excuse me, not just yellow, blue, and red, not just the primary colors. He's giving you like the big Crayola set, like the 100 crayons or whatever, but you have to like learn the colors if you're a composer, if you're an improviser, if you're listening is more fun once you know the colors too, and so that's a big part of, I think, what he's showing us in that book. This is where the material is, paint as you see fit,
Right.
but here you can learn about the colors that you can use in your music irrespective of genre.
Yeah, and the book, for people who are listening who might not know, is called The
Right,
Advancing Guitarist, and you can get it. It's
right.
it's worthy. It's a book for life, so it's not like you're
Yep,
gonna say, "Okay, I have a week off. I'm gonna open this book."
yep, yep.
You can open it,
You
but
can
you're
open
not
it.
gonna close it forever.
Yep. And
Hopefully,
it's a great book to read like backwards and
hmm
forwards, and just
Yeah.
like open it up, and that's what you're dealing with that day. It's wow, what a
Mhm.
cool
Yeah,
book.
I think I've never read that from cover to cover, I've always done the Zen thing, just whatever, close my eyes and go, whatever page I open is what I need to learn today.
Yeah.
And then you keep doing that. So I've probably in my life, probably gone through the whole book, but never sequentially. And
Totally.
it's still always amazing.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. And just then sometimes you like open it up and you turn to the page where it's just like triad, like polychords, like just one full page of just, it's actually kind of beautiful. But abstract, what to do with that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Ian, what are you thinking about, Ian? Ian has a question he generally asks everybody that might be on your mind now, or other things.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of big questions, here's something we throw at everybody on this podcast, which is a question like, what is something that students should be, like a question that they should be asking, or something that they should be thinking about that they might not think to ask, or that might not be on their radar?
Well, that's a really good question. I think it's really important to understand that all of us kind of got to this point on the basis of developing certain habits, in our lives as people and practicing. And so I get really interested in talking to people about their practice routines, how they structure their time, how they structure their days. There's like this thing in the New York Times that I read all the time called the Sunday routine, where they like go interview someone. It's like, let's check out like the head of the ASPCA, the like Animal Welfare League, and like, what do they do on a Sunday? And then like, let's go find, talk to this Broadway producer. What do they do on a Sunday? And it's like, that's like kind of a level of detail and decision making that I find kind of fascinating. Just like, all right, how do you structure your time in order to have the life that you want to have? And that has to do with, how do you find time for practicing? What do you do with that practice time? How do you organize your practice time? Probably not that obscure of a question, because I bet people do actually ask that question, but I do think that that's like really, really important, and especially for young people, where the transition from high school to college is like a massive transition from the amount of free time that you have, or at least it was my generation. Is it still, Ian? Is it still a big transition?
I don't know. It was kind of a little ways away from me.
Right. Yeah. Well, I figured you're younger than me. Yeah, learning how to develop those kinds of time management skills it's super, super important, and a big part, I think, of what we do. Big part of what everyone does. It's just, again, how much intention do you put into it?
Nate, you'd be surprised. This is actually a big topic of mine too. So we'll have to have a chat.
Cool.
About this. And because I've also been doing a lot of research on this myself, maybe for a future course or lab at Berkeley. And you would be surprised, because that kind of, to me, is the number one thing, is how you use your time. And and it is fascinating, anybody that you see that is successful, whatever that means. But I mean, that means in business, it could be in sports, it could be in music, it could be in art, it could be just parenting. Anything is really about, you're seeing someone who knows how to use their time effectively.
Totally.
They really are. And I'm always fascinated to ask all kinds of people how they structure their time and how they use it, because you will find when you start to be, or often I just often say to folks, is like, master time or it will master you. It's going to happen. The year's going to go by no matter what. So either at the end of the beginning of next year, be like, I can't read in first position, or by the end of next year can be like, hey, I can at least do this in first position reading. Right. So it's up to you really to put that together, and it's really observing yourself. Like, what am I doing now? I'm looking at my phone. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So I think that's awesome, and I think it is something really important to bring
Yeah.
up.
I remember reading this interview with the great drummer Dennis Chambers, and he made this very simple line, and I stayed with me all my life. He said, "You are what you practice." It's kind of like a variation on the like thing that we were taught when we we're in school, like you are what you eat. But you are what you practice, and so it's that like I think about that all the time. I talk to my students about that because I think about myself. I like, who am I? And I'm thinking, well, I really am like my strengths are some of the things, it's so obvious. The strengths are the things that I've practiced. The weaknesses are the things that somehow I neglected through, lack of insight into what was going on. So, you know, um, that can shape you in so many different ways when you're aware of that. It's not magically going to happen. You are what you practice. And to hear it come from such a virtuosic drummer as Dennis Chambers, it really had a big impact on me. I was like, he's kind of saying lightning didn't strike him. He worked there, wow, amazing.
I love the ownership component that both of you brought to that, like to have the life you want to have. Because I think so many times you talk to students that are like, oh, I ran out of time, or I didn't get to that, or I didn't. But I think flipping it and saying like, well, if this is important to you,
Mm-hmm.
how do you take ownership and control of your time
Totally.
so that what's important to you has meaning in your life?
Right.
And I think you're both right that it's not just about are you practicing your modes or your intervals, because
Right.
that's one thing in your reading, but it's also how you kind of choose to structure the rest of your life.
Right. And just to be like really concrete, just to throw a couple things out there for anyone listening, just like I really think it's a good idea to keep a practice journal, keeping track of what you've been working on. And I tend to work in like 20-minute sections, and I use the timer on my phone actually. And so that keeps me really focused. I'll be like, all right, 20 minutes of sight reading, or 20 minutes of this thing. And then I'm not saying I only do 20 minutes, by the way. Sometimes it needs to be an hour of sight reading, but still divided into 20-minute sections. I feel like that's like what my brain can handle. It's also a habit I developed after having had tendonitis for a little while, just needing to rest. So if you're dealing with body issues, health issues, that using a timer is really great. So then I would just look at my journal like, all right, I did like, again, you are what you practice. I'm like, wow, I did like 20 minutes of all this stuff, but I didn't play any of my repertoire. No wonder. No wonder I'm feeling rusty, you know? But it's weird. If you don't take notes, you can kind of go down some weird, you can get in some weird places. Yeah.
Cheryl, as we're wrapping up this pot of coffee, what's on your mind as we're wrapping it up?
Yeah, well, thanks, Nate. This is great. We have to hang out and do some playing, but
You do.
definitely talk about this stuff about practicing. And
Yeah.
I think you shared so much stuff. I mean, about so many topics here. I know it's going to be really, students are going to love this to
Oh,
just get inside of, some of the things you've laid down, some of the concepts you shared with us. So thanks for being with us.
thank you. Well, it's been really a lot of fun talking with all of you, and I love talking about this kind of stuff. So let's go get some more coffee, you guys.
Ian, what about you? Anything last thoughts on your mind here?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of really great practical things here, and some of it's not like unfamiliar if you've been listening to other episodes, but I mean, also it's really great to hear it from your perspective, and also like the talking about bringing your original pieces to other musicians and letting them, interpret it in the way that the music sort of demands is also really cool.
Cool.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I feel I learned a lot from this.
Well,
I'm
so
gonna
have I.
yeah, I'm gonna listen to this one again and again. And
Well,
so thank you so much, Nate.
thank you all so much. It's a wonderful resource that you're presenting by doing these podcasts. And so I've gone back and listened to some, and it's so cool to learn so much about the different faculty that you presented and the different subjects that you presented on the podcast. So thank you for this resource.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks for being a part of it. So I'm going to say formally thank you to Professor Nate Radley.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ian Steed, and thank you, Cheryl Bailey. We're going to keep drinking a little coffee here, but we're going to sign off from all of you. So to everyone listening and watching, coffee cheers, and we'll be with you on the next Coffee Talk.
Excellent. Bye-bye.